perhaps we don't think about protein the way that we should in today's modern age. Like if you go back in history, like when we would eat protein, we would consume protein, right? We weren't consuming like just choice cuts, or we weren't consuming protein powders. We weren't consuming these things in isolation. It was just protein, whether it was like collagen protein, regular protein, this protein, it was just protein and it was all collective, right? Now, I've been talking about ground beef being like an ideal source of protein for a long time, okay? And there's no real surprise as to why, if you ask me. Like you're getting a lot of different cuts in one serving, you're getting collagen in one serving, you're getting some fat, you're getting everything, like not just the effects of a choice cut, not just the effects of a scoop of collagen. But then a lot of people say, well, does that all really matter? Isn't it just the leucine that matters the most? Leucine being the primary, like singular amino acid that really contributes to muscle protein synthesis. Well, there's some newer literature now. Hear me out on this, because I've got human data, I've got rodent data, and I've got some in vitro stuff. The first study I'm going to talk about is in vitro plus rodent, but it's still really interesting. Because what they did is they took muscle progenitor cells, which are required for muscle sparing and muscle protein synthesis. Ultimately, what they found is that these muscle progenitor cells relied heavily on glycine, which comes from collagen, to really proliferate. Now, let's expand a little bit more on that. What the study indicated is that they relied on glycine for what they called population expansion. In other words, in the absence of glycine or in reduced or low levels of glycine, i.e. collagen, these muscle progenitor cells would actually go through cycle arrest. So they would actually stop the cycle of synthesis and stop the cycle of proliferation and population expansion, which is required for true muscle building, if glycine wasn't present. So it goes to show how important collagen intake is, right? We need to be either getting it from meat or adding it in via supplementation if we're not doing that. The interesting thing is that extracellular glycine coming from, again, like eating something like ground beef and getting connective tissue, actually supported global muscle protein synthesis. So it ended up actually supporting the whole thing. So adequate levels of glycine are almost what give us a baseline for leucine to do its job. Now, let's move into the next section, which is really interesting, because this one was done on rodents, but it highlights something very interesting. With the rodents, they would induce inflammation, okay? Most people in the regular world have a decent amount of inflammation, but people that are metabolically unhealthy or sick have very high levels of inflammation. So in this case, they induced inflammation via lipopolysaccharides, LPS, just the way they induce it, right? So they made these mice inflamed. And then they gave them leucine or protein, and they monitored the leucine to see if there was muscle protein synthesis. If you don't know, like leucine is the amino acid that really triggers muscle protein synthesis and growth, right? They found that there was pretty much no effect with leucine if inflammation was sky high or induced from the LPS. It's like leucine didn't trigger muscle growth at that point. But if they treated the mice with 1 gram of glycine per kilogram of body weight, which is a lot, but still, the point is, they gave them a lot of glycine. If they pre-dosed them with the glycine before the inflammation, then leucine regained 51%, basically increase. It actually worked. So the leucine ended up increasing muscle protein synthesis 51% if glycine was sort of pre-dosed. What that tells us is just the imperativeness, if that's even a word, the importance, the sheer importance of having a baseline of glycine before the body says, let's build muscle. And think about this. It kind of makes some sense in a logical way. It's like if you don't have the connective tissue, like glycine and collagen is going to support connective tissue, the body maybe says, you know what? We're not in a spot to build muscle right now. Because wouldn't it be weird to like build muscle without connective tissue growing, without bones growing to support it? It's like, it'd be unsafe. You'd snap things. So it's like maybe the body like self-regulates. I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit cray-cray on that, but it seems like it makes some logical sense. As a matter of fact, the study even says, and I quote, glycine may represent a promising nutritional intervention for muscle wasting, because it seems as though glycine might be preventative. It might help it so that even the small amounts of leucine can do a job. What does this all come back to ground beef? Well, it's simple again, because if we're just eating choice cuts all the time and protein powders all the time, it's not going to have the same effect. Here's what's interesting though. There was a new study published just in 2024, and it looked at the combination of whey protein and collagen protein. And I did a video separately on just this study, but I just want to highlight the highlights here. It was very intriguing because essentially they found that when you consume whey protein, hugely beneficial for muscle protein synthesis. Huge, like so good. Okay, but it depleted glycine levels. So when glycine levels were depleted, it would reduce connective tissue protein synthesis. So it would build muscle, but it wouldn't support the connective tissue. So what they did is they found, okay, when collagen was added into the whey, then it would actually increase the glycine levels and connective tissue protein synthesis could occur. Personally, I like whey protein. So now I just add collagen to it. I put a link for the whey protein that I use. Yes, my videos have sponsors. It's how we stay in business, but I also recommend things that I personally use. That is Bowmar Nutrition's whey protein powder. Sweetened with allulose, so there's no sugar, there's no weird artificial sweeteners. It's sweetened with allulose, which in its own category is awesome. But I'm gonna look you dead in the eyes and tell you the honest truth. It is hands down the best tasting protein powder I have ever had in my life. And I make it with some raw milk, or I make it with that Fairlife milk, which is already a little bit creamier. But now I just add a scoop of collagen to it. And if you're interested, like Bowmar Nutrition also has really good tasting collagen too. So I'll link out to it all below. That link is in the top line of the description, and it is a 15% off discount link. So you use that link and code, and it's a 15% off discount link from whatever you want from Bowmar Nutrition. But in this particular case, I highly recommend you hone in on their protein powders, and you can check out their collagen too. Now, what was really interesting about this study, and I did mention this in the other video, is that the more collagen they added, the higher the glycine. Now, they went up to 15 grams. Most collagen servings are 5 grams, okay? Now, when you consume like a 100-gram serving of ground beef, depending on the beef, you might get like 2 grams of collagen, right? So you're not getting a ton with ground beef, but you're getting more than you would with like any other cut, right? Another thing that you can consider is eating certain kinds of fish. They're gonna have marine collagen. It's a different collagen matrix that's not gonna be as beneficial as bovine collagen. And hear me out, because there's a lot of sort of propaganda that's out there on the internet to kind of make it sound like marine collagen is superior. Marine collagen is not superior. As a matter of fact, marine collagen is less superior, and it's a lot more expensive. So don't go that route unless you have a specific reason to. Bovine collagen really is where it's at. Now, additionally, there's a lot of literature to support that collagen can stimulate its own sort of peptide response to where you can build muscle with collagen. It's not just free amino acids. There is a signaling effect that comes from collagen. So you really do need to either add it in from a supplement perspective or get it from your diet. What do you need in a given day? I mean, you're probably fine with just a few grams of collagen per day. But if you're resistance training, remember that you have a level of muscle protein synthesis, and that could potentially be governed a little bit if you're not having adequate connective tissue protein synthesis. That is a real thing. There is muscle protein synthesis and connective tissue protein synthesis. Now, when you resistance train, you stimulate both. Okay, if you didn't eat protein at all and you just resistance trained, that alone is going to trigger protein synthesis. It's just gonna pull from different things, whatever. That alone is a stimulus, and that alone is anti-catabolic. But the cool thing about resistance training is it's not just stimulating muscle protein synthesis, it's also stimulating connective tissue protein synthesis. And then you go and you have a glass of whey protein, which is delicious and amazing, and you stimulate additionally muscle protein synthesis, but without much nod to connective tissue protein synthesis. So adding the collagen in could be tremendously valuable. So I recommend that you do that. I recommend that you add a good whey protein in because there's a huge benefit there. I recommend you add some collagen, but I recommend maybe you chill on some of the expensive cuts of meat and just go with a good old-fashioned ground beef burger. I'll see you tomorrow.